Yeah, I think that's some really something. This is how he.
All right, it is 2:00 and this meeting from order. Roll call, our trustees are here. Later. I'll have the pledge of allegiance.
Yeah. Just saying this. It's full of the Virgin Jesus for a while.
Next, we will have public comments. I have some comments to read for them. The audience needs to be in control of themselves and keep posters, urns, etc. down, so they don't interfere with board proceedings or other audience members' experience of the proceedings, or you may be asked to leave or be trespassed. There is opportunity for the public to express themselves during public comment, which we have. Speakers must state their name and community and speak no more than 3 minutes. Persons addressing the board are expected to observe level of civility and decorum for a public meeting. No personal attacks or disruptions from the audience, please. All right, so first we have Wendy S. from yes.
Wendy from the City of Portland. Turn your mic on. Better. My name is Wendy. I'm from the City of Coeur d'Alene. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm a resident of North Idaho, and my taxpayer dollars fund our libraries. I am a real estate broker and home educator who regularly patronizes the local library. I appreciate our CIN Library Network trustees listening to and responding to local citizens' voices, and I am in support of the recent decision to disassociate from the American Library Association. I recently read an article published on November 8th, 2023, that the Florida Department of State has joined Wyoming, Alabama, Missouri, and Texas in cutting ties with the ALA. Libraries all across the United States are withdrawing their institutional memberships with the ALA. Along with the thousands of concerned parents who are speaking at board meetings in small towns and large in every state in our country, I am adding my voice to support the common sense modification of material selection policies that protect minors from harmful content that, if distributed to minors at any other place but at a library, school, or museum, would be illegal. Library trustees in small towns and large in many states are drafting and revising policies in response to citizens' concerns brought to their library boards consistently over the past several years. I'm in support of a revised material selection policy. I've taken the time to read the CLN's draft material selection policy, and it is timely. The section under the heading Selection Process has been revised to read as follows. The Community Library Network seeks to purchase a wide range of materials that meet the informational, educational, and recreational needs of our residents in a variety of acceptable formats. The selection of materials is generally made by library staff based on clear and unambiguous written policies that infuse our mission statement and accepted goals and prioritize, published reviews and recommendations from library users, availability of materials at other libraries, and items in relation to the library's existing collection use analysis, space, price, and staff judgment and expertise. The revised material selection policy is straightforward and I believe meets the goal of unambiguity. Parents in our community widely support change in the library's current policy. In fact, parents across the country continue to advocate for change, and libraries across the country are responding to revised policies related to questionable content available in the children's and teens sections. Thank you again for allowing me to speak today.
Questions from the audience. Next we have Suzanne Kearney.
I'm Suzanne Kearney and I live in Post Falls. Show me the man and I'll show you the crime, boasted Stalin's chief of police. Do we have a shadow CLN board looking for ways to implicate the new trustees? A recent letter issued by OML Law hints at litigation, citing open meeting violations and unnamed, quote, glaring constitutional deficiencies of the current board majority. Former trustees Meyer and McCree have continued to make their appearance at CLN board meetings despite voters placing Tom Hamley and Tim Plass in their seats. What is the motive behind the laptop wielding, furiously texting McCree? The letter issued by OML claims that the current view of the materials policy is against best practices, but is it actually illegal to review? Hanley and Plass campaigned on protecting minors from sexually explicit materials and are keeping their promises by revisiting the materials policy. It is not unconstitutional to curate nor to set curation standards. Supreme Court precedent also outlines limitations on minors' First Amendment rights in the context of harmful to minors law. OML's letter further claims that the CLN minor code policy remedies for the previous issues, but this is misleading. I've given public comment more than once exposing gaping loopholes in the current policy. Those claiming that they want to, quote, put parents in charge should listen to my prior public comments and apply them. As it stands, no comprehensive effort has been made to fully inform parents of the explicit materials available, but rather continued deflection and denial have been the standard MO. Rest assured, those who truly want to protect minors would not be fighting Addison, Hanley, and Plass while hiding behind deficient policies and platitudes. If the only true legal issue is open meeting law violations, I'm sure the current board can remedy those immediately. If McCree's motive is truly to keep the public informed, OML law should be satisfied with this correction. Nevertheless, my guess is that the shadow board will continue to troll meetings, scrutinize every move of Addison, Hanley, and Plass in hopes of an opportunity to pounce. In the name of protecting libraries, they will be seeking ways to initiate costly litigation, foment public unrest, and perpetuate the false freedom of keeping sexually explicit content available to minors. The voters made their choice last May. Why are they being resisted? Month after month, Clean Books for Kids came to these meetings to tell the prior board to clean up the children's sections. Their response didn't make the cut, so the voters cut them. Let the voters have their turn and stop trying to turn the CLN into another NIC.
Right, so this is Mariana Cochran.
Since Idaho is one of a small group of states that were part of the Oregon Trail, it's fitting to discuss being pioneers. In fact, Idaho still has remnants of those wagon trail ruts. Those ruts progress through unknown and sometimes hostile territory, but ironically, the definition of rut has come to mean the opposite of progress. Instead, it implies grinding, dug-in stagnancy. For CLN, what may have seemed in the past to have been avant-garde modernity regarding progressive kids' books was actually a destructive rut. Sexually explicit library books for kids have been causing corrosion for decades until CLN's patrons began to speak out en masse in 2021. To illustrate how long this has been festering, here are two teen books from Post Falls. One is copyrighted 2002, and they're referenced in this New York Times article from 2006. Recall the 90s feminist icon, author, Rhodes Scholar, and Bill Clinton advisor, Dr. Naomi Wolf. Her 1991 breakout international best-selling book, The Beauty Myth, garnered her the descriptor of, quote, a leading spokeswoman of the third wave of the feminist movement. The New York Times named it, quote, one of the 70 most influential books of the 20th century. In 1997, she wrote Promiscuities, which reports on and analyzes the shifting patterns of contemporary adolescent sexuality. Yet despite these credentials, Dr. Wolf writes in this same 2006 New York Times article decrying the de-evolution of young adult fiction, quote, unfortunately for girls, these novels reproduce the dilemma they experience all the time. They are expected to compete with pornography, but can still be labeled sluts. These folks package corruption with a cute overlay. So even one of the most influential feminists recognizes the toxicity. Fast forward to now, the omnipresent yet former board trustees would have us believe that they were so in touch with the patrons, which precipitated the unacted upon policy changes last November and the voted on the day before the campaign filing deadline tiered minor cards. Patrons knew we were being pandered to for votes. So now this current board majority has taken the courageous and sometimes hostile journey to finally amend the grievous wrongs wrought on minors due to CLN's abundance of horrid books. However, you're not alone. Other bold pioneers are also taking these steps, not coincidentally. Another board that was also part of the Oregon Trail. Campbell County, Wyoming's public board also severed ties with the ALA earlier this year, as well as making significant policy upgrades regarding sexually explicit materials for minors. So you're on the right path. I'll close with a quote from another highly regarded progressive of her day, Eleanor Roosevelt. Quote, "We must not adopt the methods of our ancestors. Instead, we must emulate that pioneer quality in our ancestors that made them attempt new methods for a new world."
Thank you. Next, we have Bugler.
Hi, my name is Kim Bugler and I'm from the CDA, and I have a book here, and if I were to open it up and if pornography were to spill out of it, that would be completely inappropriate. Yet we have books in this library that some of which have images that I believe are completely inappropriate. But even if the images are not appropriate, or images are fine, the words that are on the page, even if there are no pictures, those words, they're put there to create pictures in our mind. They're put there for us to have an image or an act. Clean Books for Kids told about the Rathdrum Library, which featured a book, Changing You, that promotes and teaches masturbation. My kids don't want to bump into that stuff. I don't want my kids to bump into that stuff. If someone wants their kids to learn that, they can go ahead and teach them that. They've got that right. But I want a children's section that is safe, where I can feel like I can take my kids to the library, where they can go around and they're not going to be bumping into materials that are going to be inappropriate, way ahead of their developmental level, that are going to push them into places that they're not even ready to have those conversations. So whatever you can do to promote clean books, whatever you can do to promote libraries that are going to be safe for our children to just explore. It's fun going in and being able to walk without mom and just to pick out books that catch your attention. I don't want them looking at a stand that's promoting something that would be very age inappropriate for them to come across that content. I want them to be able to have freedom to enjoy. And I think we're robbing our kids of that freedom when we're putting all sorts of materials in our libraries that are not giving our kids that right to just explore on their own without being worried about what they're going to bump into. Thank you.
Next, we have Becky T.
Hi, I'm Becky T, and I just wanted to say I'm so grateful for the fact that I'm able to stand up here and say a few words. Can't take that for granted. And I have 3 points I want to say. First off, I want to say I appreciate the efforts and contribution of the board as they are actively brainstorming ways to have a library system that ensures that minors are protected with what types of material that they can check out alone and by themselves. Simple, but very necessary steps like these are excellent ways to help protect our young people from pornographic content. So I just wanted to say thank you. Just like there used to be a behind the counter video section in the video stores when we were growing up as kids. Okay, we're dating ourselves, right? You know, working to keep that X-rated content in the library away from the children's section is the same thing. Separating the X-rated explicit videos from the other videos made sense. And it's common sense, so separating sexually explicit books out of the children's section also makes sense. And just like their ratings on movies like parental guidance, PG-13 are to help parents be aware of the content, putting a simple warning and requiring parent approval about certain books can give people awareness, and it just makes sense. Thirdly, some may say it's a parent's job to screen and figure out what their children should read, and I think that's something, despite all the varying opinions in the room, that we should absolutely all agree on. But how are we to expect the parents to screen something that's already labeled kids safe? So what do I mean? Oftentimes, parents can be very naive and trusting of the children's section in the library. Parents might not even realize or understand their child could access X-rated material because the entire section of the library is labeled children's library. People may automatically assume the words children's library means something free from sexually explicit content, just like they'd assume a G movie is kid-friendly. It's the labeling, I think, that can throw the parents off. So for example, when you order a kid's meal, you expect the portion to be small and cheap with kid-friendly food, not caviar and truffles with a side of raw sushi and horseradish. When you go to a children's museum, you expect the art and experience to be hands-on and interactive, not dull and boring with a sit-down lecture about 500 AD archaeology. And when you ride a kiddie ride at Silverwood, you expect the ride to be slow and easy and not a breakneck supreme screen roller coaster. So when parents with their child roam to read in the children's section of the library, most parents, I think, would assume upon the library that indeed the section would be for children. They would assume that there would be a wide and robust section of books that would both fit a child's juvenile reading ability and intellectual understanding, and they would certainly not expect pornographic and explicit sexual content to be presented to their children in the books. So helping to make the children's section what it implies it is, and perhaps assumed by parents to be, is something I encourage and urge the current board to continue. Thank you.
Next, we have David Stott.
Good afternoon. My name is Dan, and as we approach Thanksgiving, I just wanted to take a moment to thank each of you for your role in serving Community Library Network. I know it's a difficult role at times. There's lots of stress and challenges that you face, but I do hope that you can pause and enjoy a restful Thanksgiving day with your family and or friends. Enjoy a good meal, a good dessert, and give thanks to God for all of his blessings in your life. The electorate spoke this past May for a change in leadership for the Community Library Network. And I appreciate the direction of the board in taking an undertaking to create a new policy for material selection and to close loopholes that allows for harmful materials to be procured and placed in collections designated for minors. I want you to be encouraged that the majority who elected you stand with you, trustees, who believe that the tax-funded materials harmful to minors should be prohibited. I'm hopeful that with wise counsel and dialogue, your efforts will be realized with a new policy that the electorate who placed you here will be happy with. Be encouraged and resolute, knowing that your efforts aren't in vain. What you're doing counts for the safety and well-being of our children. Thank you for your time, and do have a happy Thanksgiving.
Next, we have Amy Lee.
Pulse. I am a homeschooling mom of 6, ranging from high school students enrolled at NIC on down to a very busy and lucky she is so cute toddler. I'm a homeschooling graduate myself who went on to earn every bit of a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from the Colorado School of Mines. All that to say, I'm no stranger to libraries all across this great country, in fact. From creaking timber floors in a tiny hiccup of a town in Nebraska to the sprawling marble of DC and Denver, I've loved them all. But when I started bringing my kids to this library 3 years ago, things changed. Just about every book they grabbed off the shelves and piled into our cart. When I got home and started flipping through the pages, they went right back into the returns box. I was disappointed at how negative and at times inappropriate so many of their selections were, but they couldn't even read yet. They were just grabbing what was being displayed on the shelves. So I started looking for the classics to bring home instead, books like Anne of Green Gables, Carry On, Mr. Bowditch, and Around the World in 80 Days. but rarely were they represented at our library, usually had to be requested from remote and far-flung locations such as Priest River. Eventually, we stopped coming to the library. Anything we needed, we requested. It's actually been over a year since my homeschooling kids have set foot in this library. None of the books on the shelves have been worth the trip. Attorney McCreary just recently asked on what date it was discussed in an open session, the purpose for revisiting the materials selection policy less than a year after its adoption on November 4th of 22 by the old Board of Trustees of which she was a part. I would like to draw Ms. McCreary's attention to the well-documented meeting that occurred the election night of May 16th of this year. During this gathering of the voting supporters of the CLN, she and Ms. Meyer were requested to step down for the express purpose of making way for public servants whose vision for the CLN more closely aligned with that of the actual communities they serve. Since that public meeting, where every constituent had the opportunity to speak, this newly elected board has diligently sought to achieve the purpose for which they were specifically elected, to realign our library's policies with the wishes of the community who support and use it. We're not seeking to ban books here. What we are saying is that as the community who owns this house, we want our voices to be heard regarding the treasures that are invested in to fill it, especially pieces available to our kids. The people of Kootenai County support our newly commissioned board as they faithfully represent us in this reclamation of our locally owned and operated library. We affirm that they are in fact doing exactly what we elected them to do as they rewrite the material selection policy and as they sever ties with the American Library Association. Thank you.
Keep signs down. Next we have Jeff Lewis.
Hi there, Jeff Lewis, Post Falls. Before the meeting started, I gave each of the trustees and the director this handout. The reason I did it, these are from a website called booklooks.org. A lot of us are familiar with this, and this is a website for parents to review the content of children's books. The reason I gave it to you is I'm suggesting that CLN use these book summaries as part of the criteria of material selection. I also suggest that your discussions include content warning stickers for parents and children to easily identify sexually explicit books on shelves. This is a rap CD. Right here. Parental advisory explicit content. I would like you to consider something like this as you go ahead in your material selection policy and discussions. Also, the 2024 legislative year is coming up in January, and there will be another bill introduced to end the exemption for Idaho schools and libraries to promote or distribute harmful materials to minor children. Last year, this bill, House Bill 314, passed both the House and the Senate, was vetoed by Governor Little and failed by one vote in the House to override the veto. I've been talking with some of our state legislatures, and let me tell you, they're assured there will be another bill coming in the legislature next year. And they are very, very sure that there will be a law next April protecting children, a state law protecting children in our libraries. And if I'm wrong in that, I'll buy you a milkshake at Rogers, everybody on the board. In the meantime, thanks to the board in your effort to restore common sense to our libraries, these sexually explicit books did not appear in libraries overnight. They were slowly infused over a period of years. Here in this little room, you are fighting against book publishers, news and TV media, the American Library Association, teachers unions, colleges, and social media, and all heavily influenced by Marxist and socialist thought. You have great courage. Keep up the good work. Also, a shout out to Sheriff Bob Norris, who took a stand a month ago for decency and for my daughters. That's it.
Logan, you do not have the permission to film me because your films are used for abusing and slandering people.
This is a public forum. I think it's a public forum, right? It is public anyway.
I am I am addressing the policy change under consideration by this board. As a user and funder of the Community Library Network, I'm not interested in having shallow-mindedness and theocratic authoritarian thinking determine what information I can access from our public library. To make a clear and concise point, I'm going to use the book Identical as an example. I've read this book, and admittedly, it was a difficult story to read. The book opens with a dedication that says, quote, "This book is dedicated to Diane, Karen, and Tracy, dear friends and special women who rose to shine like stars in dark places in their lives. With special thanks to Jude, who provided invaluable insight about psychology and sexual abuse, its victims and victimizers," end quote. This book represents the real life experience of these traumatized women and the painful consequences they endured. The book ends by communicating hope for healing from childhood sexual abuse and parental abuse through effective therapy. Furthermore, it inspires self-love and compassion for others who have survived and experienced childhood sexual abuse, childhood trauma, and the resulting mental illness. To many people, this book can be repugnant. It is, in my opinion, only a pathological individual with a sadistic child molester could consider this book to represent exciting pornography. There is justified value in this book's message for young girls who have been traumatized and victimized. Only small-minded, ill-thinking individuals would get hung up on the sexual abuse and identity story and overlook the true value in its helpful message. Identical being one of the books on your hit list, shame on you for even considering imposing your small-minded, shallow thinking on CNN patrons. I'm closing with one very strong message for you. Leave our civil rights alone. And somebody asked me to provide you this signed petition with 297 signatures on it. I'll give it to Alexa.
Okay, next we have Josiah Mannion.
You know. I'll keep this hopefully pretty short. I don't even expect to use it full time. Josiah. Hayden Library is my home library, has been since moved here. Y'all know me already. I remember at one time considered y'all as being driven by patriarchal white Christian nationalism, and the board majority here has, to date, given me nothing to contradict that opinion. Beyond which, I'm frankly shocked at the ineptitude of the board majority. Beyond being, you're losing people from your libraries, not just because of the ideologically driven stuff, but just from sheer ineptitude. What I think regarding the collection policy is that you are stealing resources from people that need them to find the words for experiences that have already happened in their lives, in their communities. They happen to them not because of something in the library. They happen to them in their church communities, in their homes, from their friends and family. I think a psychologist one time, very early on in this process, said, yes, there are absolutely problems with youth in this society, with young adults in this society. It's not because of libraries. When you hurt the libraries, by restricting those resources, you're hurting these kids. You're hurting these young adults. You're hurting these 20 to 30-year-olds. You're hurting these people that are retired and trying to figure out what went on in their life. Because these books give them the resources and give them the language to describe things that they have not been able to wrap their minds around. It's easy to blame something like a library, but I encourage y'all, everybody, to look inside your own communities for the answers to those problems, not your institutions. Your institutions didn't cause those problems. Somebody else did. Inside your community. Look inside, not outside. That's all. Thanks.
It's our public comments portion, and we'll now move into the board business. Want to remind everyone that in order to speak, a board member must obtain the floor by having your call on them first. So we'll move into the consent agenda. Do we have any corrections to the minutes of the regular meeting of October 19th? So I think there's a typo on page 4 of the October 19th minutes. In the big paragraph in the center, starting with the line that starts part language added. Go over from that, it says Addison called for consensus or in part. Would make more sense if it said Addison called for consensus on in part. Business manager.
And it makes sense to say, adding in part.
That works. Okay, any other typos or corrections over 19 meeting minutes, or should we move on to the CIN October 2023 financial statements? Trustee Blank.
Order, the consent agenda is, the reason we have a consent agenda is to do everything at once. We're going down the list. Our agenda's big. I guess a consent agenda is not to go down the list. Otherwise, that's why we consolidated into a consent agenda. But it was more to say, do we have any questions on anything on this? And then move on if there were not.
Okay, that's fine. Does anyone have any other questions on that? All right, there's an action item. I would entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda as amended.
I move to accept the consent agenda for the meeting, back up.
We would just do the whole thing at one time, just do the whole consent agenda.
As amended.
Yeah, I move to the consent agenda, the minutes of the regular meeting of October 19th. Would be as amended.
You could just move to accept the whole consent agenda as amended.
And with the entire consent agenda as amended.
It has been moved to accept the entire consent agenda as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so yeah, consent agenda is approved. So we will move on to the minutes of the special meeting of September 27th.
What were our concerns?
Trustee Robinson?
I believe this was the dispute that the director was not available via telecommunication.
I think so. That could be, yeah. So do we accept it as is?
You made the motion, or I'm sorry.
there's a reason this wasn't approved last meeting. I believe it has to do with what's in yellow. So is it accepted that it was the truth that the director was available via telecommunication?
Supplies?
So yeah, I'm a little confused. I have an email dated November 9th about the 29th, September 29th meeting with yellow. That's currently the transcripts. I think that's the wording that we would accept in that email. But then I've got a September 29th agenda.
Minutes.
Anyway, I'm a little confused. Are we approving what's in this email?
Okay, we're actually on September 27th. I think we just said the 29th. We're not to that.
Yeah, well, it's same thing. I've got an email November 9th on about September 27th.
Okay, so what we really would be approving is the minutes from that meeting, which is just the single page like that, has some yellow on it.
So I have a question, of why weren't we able to approve it before? I can't remember.
Well, if there's any question that you might need debate or clarification, then.
Yeah, what was it?
Pardon me, I still have the floor.
Oh, sorry.
Anyway, yeah, we would pull it from the consent agenda so that we could spend more time on it. So if people's questions are clarified by the explanatory or the transcript here, then we can go ahead and approve it. You guys ready? That's cool. Mr. Robinson?
So I believe the problem why it wasn't approved last meeting was because a fellow trustee said that Eccles was not available via telecommunication for the meeting that we had. The third special meeting that week, what was that? October. I forget what date that was. Actually, that happened the first of the 3 special meetings that week, when the director said she wouldn't be in town, but said she would be available via telecommunications. And a trustee said that she didn't say that, and that's why it was held up. So that's what this is about. So can we accept this now?
You guys ready to accept it?
Can we accept it with the addition of the transcript from the video? I mean, can that be, added to the amendment, added to the minutes? Just as a clarification?
I don't know if that would be necessary. We already accept the minutes as is.
But if there was a question about what was said, that transcript would clarify it. I think that's why it was probably put in our packet, and it's right here. So if we could just accept that transcript along with the minutes. I'm just gonna move that we accept the minutes as amended of Wednesday, September 27th, with the attachment of the transcript of that meeting as well.
Okay, let me see if I can get this straight. Once again, I forgot to write it down. Okay, so it has been moved to accept the minutes from the September 27th, 2023 meeting. With the transcript attached.
Well, as amended.
It has been, they weren't amended, were they?
But that's what it says, amended.
Was that from an amended?
Meeting was amended.
Okay, so the actual minutes have not been amended.
Okay, the minutes I have in front of me say amended.
Okay, the director just said that the agenda had been amended, so that.
Okay, why? This was in my packet. It says amended. This is the 27th, and these are the minutes.
Okay, it has been moved to accept the September 27th, 2023 minutes as amended with the transcript attached. All those in favor?
Aye.
Nay.
Okay, the ayes have it, and so the minutes are accepted as amended with the transcripts. So we will move on to minutes of the special meeting of September 29th.
Why did we, I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
Trustee Blank?
Why, there are no they aren't amended. Why did we not approve them last time? Another question. I apologize. I should have looked this up. Does anybody know? Can anybody help?
I don't recall.
Trustee Plus?
So I'm a little confused. I see the yellow in this. Does that mean something changed? Or on the agenda, am I supposed to find that same sentence here and see it's not yellowed
In the
out?
minutes?
Well, no. No, in the,
Up here it says
it
minutes.
says agenda, but yeah, it does say minutes on the top there. So I find that sentence and it looks the same as the yellow, and I guess the yellow is just meant to be there. I objected to that because we were not looking for a comprehensive insurance quote. We were looking for full coverage quotes, I believe is what I was asking for. And I'm just trying to clarify that, but I can go either way.
Okay, Director?
I took some personal notes after the last regular meeting about this section and what the question was, and a trustee stated that he believed that the library director continued to work with insurance brokers to obtain a full coverage insurance quote was what he recalled. And so in your handout, you have a memo. The secretary and the notes reflect quote, and that's what I highlighted in yellow. A consensus was reached for the insurance brokers to continue a comprehensive insurance quote was what was reflected in the original minutes. And now you can see in the transcript that that most accurately reflects what occurred in. So it did not state that, quote, the library director continued to work with insurance brokers to obtain a full coverage insurance coverage. It said a consensus was reached for the insurance brokers to continue a comprehensive insurance quote. So there was some question about what the consensus was covering. So I would recommend again that if you want to include the transcript, that clarifies for everyone. But I do believe the original minutes were accurate.
Trustee Blank?
Okay, I'm gonna move that we accept the minutes for Friday, September 29th, and attach the transcript that was provided with them.
Okay, it has been moved to accept the Friday, September 29th minutes, the transcripts attached. All those in favor?
Discussion.
Discussion.
Just as a point, I look down here, I guess maybe somebody can point out to me on the transcript, where does it say comprehensive insurance quote? I see it in the minutes in the yellow, but I don't see it.
You're asking for where, which one? You want to say
I'm saying the minutes say
the
the
transcript?
consensus was reached to continue for a comprehensive quote, and I don't see the words in the transcript, comprehensive quote anyplace.
I think that the comprehensive quote is from the, I'm sorry, I forgot to raise my hand.
Trustee Blank?
I think the comprehensive quote was from the transcript. So you're concerned about not seeing the transcript language in the minutes? Is that what is the concern here?
Sure.
Trustee Fox?
So all I'm saying is the minutes that yellowed out saying comprehensive insurance quote was said, and I thought the purpose of putting the transcript in was to verify that's what was said, but I don't see where it was in the transcript. I see that we're asking for consensus for insurance quotes, and it should not be stopped. And maybe it didn't say full coverage, but we were specifically asking for insurance quotes not be stopped.
Trustee Blank?
The sentence on the second page of the minutes, it's the second line down. For this, it says a consensus was reached for the insurance brokers to continue a comprehensive insurance quote. That was what the minutes were, but the transcript says, puts the line in for a continue a comprehensive insurance quote. So, okay, so it's the one and the same is what you're saying, or was it different? Was it shown differently?
The minutes, yeah, thank you. The minutes are a summary, and I think they accurately reflect that. The actual close quote doesn't make a lot of sense, in my opinion. Then I guess we should make sure that it's abundantly clear that we have consensus that we are still pursuing that the insurance quotes should not be stopped. Say yes, allow the videos. So, I mean, I think that is probably the most reflects what was consensus, but it's clear. I think it's a better summary conversation to say that a consensus was reached for the insurance to continue a comprehensive insurance quote. With the minutes before, the transcript can be 40 minutes of conversation, and we're trying to summarize it and summarize it up. So again, recommend that if there's any question that we.
Trustee Boss?
I'm fine to just go with it and be done with this.
Okay, it has been moved to approve the Friday, September 29th minutes and attach the transcript. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, I have it, and the transcript is, or the Friday, September 29th minutes with the attached transcript is approved. All right, so next we will go into the Community Library Network October 2023 financial statements. Trustee Boss?
I was just gonna ask explanation on some of the expenses on lines 61, 62, 63, 64, and then 65. Those are all over 21%. But are the first lines basically a quarterly fee has been paid? Or, I mean, we're 1 month into this and we've already spent 25%.
Trustee Blank?
Attached to our financial statements is the explanation. One of the things I would wonder if on the explanation we could put numbers for where they relate to the lines, but attached on there, it does explain each one of those. So for CIN, it says we paid it quarterly. For the courier, it says we paid it quarterly. So it does give you an idea of where that comes from. It's really helpful. That sheet that explains the lines are really, they're very helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Blank?
I have another question. It's on line 65 concerning our insurance. And in the explanation, it says that 50% of the ICRIM policy and 100% of the Great American Insurance policy have been paid. And that the balance of the ICRIM policy is expected to be paid by April 1. If we pay the balance, we will be over budget, of course. Are we expected to pay the balance? Can we just have it for half a year, or are we? This is a question. Have we become, liable because we haven't paid? Is that expected to be paid, or is it if we find other insurance, we don't pay that.
We discussed this a little.
I know, it's probably, I'm very.
And so I'm just gonna sort of state my reflection, I don't have it printed, but my understanding is that in the ICRIM agreement, that we are committing for the year,
Okay.
and that it is at ICRIM's discretion if they would return any funds or make a determination about whether or not, but essentially it's a pool type of insurance. And so they have estimated that we will be with them for the year. And do you have a different, you explained it, it's in our agreement, but that's my recollection.
I am very sorry. I know
Trustee
you.
Blank?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to apologize. I had figured it had been said to me about 15 times. And I just wanted to get really clear. So thanks.
Okay, our time is almost up for that section. Are we entertaining a motion to accept the meeting?
Does this include the CIN when we're paying these financial statements? I don't think it's a specific one. I don't.
No, this is Community Library Network.
Yeah, I know, but if they CIN in,
The CIN is separate.
yeah, I know, but is that on the agenda though?
It was in consent.
Okay. Okay, oh, I understand, okay. Again. Go ahead. All right.
Great, Trustee Boss?
So my favorite line is ICS on the other assets, and we're just below 2 million.
What
And
line?
ICS, other assets on the
Is-
last page, or next to last.
It's on the balance sheet. Is that what you?
Yes, balance sheet. I'm sorry.
Right in the center.
Under assets.
ICS is the fund that I was interested in watching. Carry forward is the reserved part, but it looks to me like if you take out carry forward and these other commitments, we've got 1.3 million or something at this point, which sounds like it's pretty sound to me to be at this point. But I don't know if there's any comments on that from the business manager.
Business Manager, do you want to respond?
I could adjust. I provided last regular meeting kind of a summary of where our carry forward and where our balance was.
The
And so
ICS, no.
That's the most accurate statement. I could resend that out.
Sure.
Again, for funds that are restricted and funds that are committed to operations. So I think it's really important to, a carry forward is not quite the same as ICS. And so I think that's an important distinction too, but I can resend and the board can review what we have in reserves for operations, have it broken out by what's for emergency or unanticipated expenses.
Trustee Blank?
It is my understanding that a sweep fund simply pulls money out so that we can, it wouldn't be something we would use to establish where we are in our budget or where we are financially. It simply pulls money out and uses it, and we get some interest on it, and it puts it back in. I mean, I don't, that isn't a fund to establish whether we have where our monies are.
I like to think of it as the fund where payroll comes for, you know, we have to pay payroll, it's all on the same day, the same month, we have to have enough cash. So that's what we're paying payroll out of. So if you want to think of it as like a bank account that's cash rather than, so it's a combination of different types, but the carry forward is different than ICS.
Okay, so, do we not have a timer anymore? Because it's for a couple minutes, past, I don't remember hearing it, or did I just not hear it?
I'm just going to tell you when we're closed.
We're over in a couple minutes. All right, then, I would move that we accept the Community Library Network October 2023 financial statements. Any further discussions? Okay, all those in favor of accepting the Community Library Network October 2023 financial statement, say aye.
Right.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it, and those are now accepted. Now we move on to the discussion of fiscal year 2024 legal and insurance expenditures covered by fund source. Yeah, it was, so, it seems to me that an overage in a budget category is normally handled internally, but if the director wants input from the board, I'd suggest that our materials budget is already pretty decimated, so I don't want to touch that. And the library could look at streamlining staff, completing the insurance quote process with Redmond Insurance and another brokerage as the board majority already directed staff to do. Remove both mobile service to areas not in our taxing district. CIN, use money from our E-rate discounts, discontinue programs that are not the proper role of government and that compete with churches and the private sector. I'm not saying these things are bad, just perhaps not the proper role of government, like hygiene numbers, food drives, paid performers. Also the Green Gal music, there's anything.
If I could just clarify, I was asking when I put this on the agenda, if you want to use reserves. So if you want to use your carry forward balance, or if you want us to continue to use operational funds. So I don't need specific direction on what has already been approved in the budget. I need an understanding if your intention is to use carry forward, or if your intention is to use what is already budgeted. So I don't need specific direction on hampers.
Okay, I just was thinking, yeah, it's, because like I said, normally these things are handled internally.
Exactly, but I believe that because you're talking about $75,000, that you may want to review that as a carry forward expenditure.
Trustee Wright?
We received that information on this in our last month's packet, is that correct? Okay, and I didn't bring that. Does anybody have a copy? I really apologize. Does that need to be answered today?
I would just suggest that, and the reason why I'm asking now is that if we are going to be making changes to operational line items to incur that cost, then I need to start making plans as soon as possible. As we said, the book budget is limited, staffing is limited. We've already made adjustments this year to programming. I'm going to say easy reductions, if you will, have already taken place. We've already experienced pretty big change. And so I need to have as much preparation for that as possible.
Okay. I have a question. Is there any chance that this sounds like a discussion that we should put some time into, and trying to make a decision right this minute with paper. I don't have paperwork in front of me. I haven't been able to study it or even I sometimes ask for information in between meetings from staff so I can get a better understanding. I haven't done that, and I apologize for that. Can we put this on for December's agenda so we can have some more in-depth discussion? If we're talking about that amount of money and those kinds of cuts and changes, 5 minutes is not enough. Could we do that? Would that work?
Trustee Claus?
So I'm a little confused myself because I don't think I have a copy of this sheet. So what we're discussing is the legal and insurance expenditures, or which line item is this for 5 minutes?
I guess 65.
Yeah, we're discussing where the money's going to come from.
I mean, which agenda item?
Oh.
We did financial statements, so is it the discussion legal and insurance?
Discussion fiscal year 2024 legal and insurance expenditures.
So no, we don't need to make a decision now. I'm not interested myself in taking carry forward out. I don't know why we're not just using the regular funds that we would be using, but we can look at it next month. But I need some specifics on this.
Trustee Henley?
Yeah, I'm not sure where, he said, I'm reading the financial statement correctly. if we paid half of our insurance costs already, and now we've used 64% of what we budgeted that line item, we're not wildly over, in my opinion. If I'm looking at this correctly, and then regarding the legal and professional, we've used 8.7% of our budget so far. Well, this is 1 month into the year, so that doesn't sound wildly outside, but I would say that we would, if I got it correct, it'll be an issue 6 months from now when the next premium is due, if everything is correct, which is a ways out, so. I don't see it as necessarily a high priority at the moment.
Trustee Robinson?
I'm fine, if we push this off till next month. However, because I just found the paperwork, part of the concern is the projected, legal cost compared to not only last year, but the last, several years. So that's part of it as well. And next month, if it's on the agenda, when everybody gets this paper again, you'll see that it's not just the insurance, it's also the projected legal expenditures.
Okay, and I'm also good with bringing that back up next month. So by consensus, we had at least 3 or 4 people say that next month will be fine. So we will move on to circulation statistics. Over 2023. Any questions or comments on that? Trustee Lang?
Does the staff have any comments concerning circulation of any sort?
Without objections, staff can answer that.
I don't really have anything to highlight this one. It's pretty average one, and looks good.
Response?
I was just, again, asking for cards that have been, expired cards, to put that on here instead of just, or is that what we're doing? Look, are we, instead of looking at new card holders, are we looking at the difference when we say current card holders? Because we do have new patrons, but I'm looking for growth month to month, what's going on. And then my second question is, are there video games being used in the library, and where does that fit? Is that internet use? And how much is, how do we track how much video games are being used?
Director?
I'm not quite sure I understand that question fully. We do not monitor people's internet use for what content they're using it for. So people research, people shop, people have entertainment, work, school. We don't in any way track that information.
So it's all under internet.
Trustee Fox?
Yeah, okay. Just clarification, that there isn't a separate thing that is a non-internet video game. It would just be if they connect to the internet, and then you wouldn't know what they're doing with it.
Trustee Robinson?
It's interesting, like 2 years ago, I brought up people playing games on the computers in the library, especially children, and I had thought it'd be a great idea if that somehow could come to an end, just because I thought, it'd be nice if kids didn't spend their time just playing video games. But it was told to us then that once somebody logs on, and you can't restrict what comes into, and you might know some of this since you are in that business, you can't restrict games coming in without restricting other things from coming in. I'm probably not saying that right, but I did have that concern at some point, but I don't think there's a way that they can track what people are doing online, because I don't think that that's what, the libraries literally can't do that. But this is germane to what is talked about right now. I did notice in the board report, they were talking about the virtual reality games. I don't know if they're called games, but at first I was like, ugh, you know, why is that here? But it was explained that there's a lot of training that is done now in the workplace that uses virtual reality. So to have youngsters and I guess adults as well being exposed to that, it is you know, possibly the role of a library to bring that into people's lives if it's literally a training tool in the workforce. Did everybody read that part in the board reports? I found that very interesting. And it was an eye opener for me because I did walk by this room over here, I don't know, a couple months ago, and I saw some patrons in there with the things on their face, and I was like, But then after reading that that's used for, you know, training in different workforces nowadays, I thought, you know, it's very interesting.
Okay, I had noticed that our free gal usage is way down. And I know that it costs like $17,000 per year for free gal, so people can stream music. And anyway, I just wanted to mention that's again one possible area that we could cut that doesn't seem to be as valued as it was in times past. When is that paid again? Is it May? Did we pay for that? Okay, all right, doesn't matter. Anyway, just a consideration. All right, so this is not an action item, so we will go ahead and head into our next section, which is the director's report.
And that CIN Library Director has 8 principal duties, including the 3 that I'm going to talk about or highlight today. 1, financial operations, appraises the organization's financial position and recommends strategies to the board for achieving financial stability and growth. Personnel management, manages staff and responsible for all staff, works to ensure fair and lawful personnel practices. And planning and policy, making recommendations to library policies, services, and fiscal activities to the board. In that context, I wanted to mention some concerns. The board is reviewing library policy changes and harmful to minor claims without any likely liability or legal fee coverage in this area from ICRIM. So I believe this does pose some risk to the library's financial operations. The board is reviewing library policy changes, which nationally similar actions are resulting in employee workplace discrimination claims. This poses some risk to the library's personnel management and financial operations. As stated in the library's personnel policy, the library must provide training annually to staff through ICRIMP University. Now that ICRIMP University is no longer available, alternative training is being explored. Without entity or insurance provided risk management, this poses some risk to the library's personnel management and financial operations. The board is currently reviewing the library director evaluation policy. Great American Insurance offers a limited employment hotline for risk management. Adopting employment-related policies without the support of specialized employment expertise poses some risk to the library's personnel management. I wanted to mention I will be bringing a job description to next month's board meeting. It will be for a librarian to specialize and assist in collection development. I'm also looking at restructuring the interlibrary service since borrowing may now come under the library's selection policy. Planning and policy recommendations and decisions must go hand in hand. Because of these potential areas of risk, I would like to explore with General Counsel the opportunity to bring an engagement for legal expertise in areas of financial and employment law for the community library network. My recommendation is that this would be for the board to review, consider, and engage in the next 2 months. Next month, I will draft a resolution to reserve funds for the board to consider. Please let me know if there is any further information you need on this topic. Next month, I will update on the implementation of minor homes. And finally, the library is currently working on creating monthly themes that will showcase library's resources. The themes will be represented in communication channels, including book displays, display cases, newsletter, social media, and the website. Winter and summer reading programs may be familiar, but we are excited to be featured in some of our other of financial health or field digital literacy.
Thanks, thank you. Any questions? Trustee Link?
I would just like to thank you for for that and for the fact that we will be I appreciate you highlighting to us things that may be possible risk. That's a deep concern to me now that we are so our insurance is much more limited than it used to be, and from what you gave us last month, our financial resources may be as well. So I appreciate that. And yeah, thank you.
I was hoping that you could maybe send out a copy of that. To the board. Trustee Glass?
Is a little bit different, but is this monthly report, is this part of your report also? Okay, are you gonna cover that, or that's just for us to ask questions of you?
You can ask questions if there's things that come up. We included in the packet in advance just for trustees.
No,
It's a summary of what we've been doing around the district, communications, all our major services.
Trustee Glass?
so if now's the time to ask, I did want to ask, there's the collection department on page 4. It's showing some new, I guess it's the top juvenile nonfiction. I received a list that was, I think, put out by the library of new books in October, and I don't see them on here. You know what? I don't know much about these books. I feed her to the beast, and the beast is me. And you got a gal with her face in the water or blood. I don't know what it is, but anyway, some of this is. Some of, don't judge the book, but but I'm just saying, can we, instead of just getting in this report a couple of books, can we start getting a list of all the books that were bought this month? So maybe by library, or somebody's making a decision by books. I just like to be able to keep track of it. Can we get a list of new books, just the titles and author?
Trustee Blank?
I think it would be an important thing to find out how much time that might take the staff to do in order to give us. And also that is, I don't know why a trustee would want that, but that seems as if it might be dipping into the procedures of the staff, which is not our job. And so I don't know, what I'm particularly concerned about is we keep piling things for our staff to do without recognizing that we may be cutting into time, which is needed in other important ways.
Trustee Voss?
Well, I'm sure there's a spreadsheet of what's been bought. That's all I'm looking for, is just a simple, I don't need descriptions, just a spreadsheet list of what was bought this month. So that's my request, just include it in the report, monthly report.
If that's feasible.
I have no idea what people asked for. So you're asking, you specifically, we're talking about collection, and this lists top juvenile items. So you're asking for a list of books that were added to the collection of juvenile. So the library has almost 300,000. And so, I mean, do you want a list of all of our books? Because we have it on the catalog, right? So it's not clear where the escape.
Please. Sure. I'm asking for new books bought this month. I don't know how many books, but we didn't give you a lot of money to buy a lot of books. Maybe what, 30,000 a month or something, but I don't know how many books are being bought. Can we just get a list each month in this report of the new books bought? And it would be for the whole library.
So I'm just going back to your.
Thank you.
about that same idea that trustee Ross brought up. I'm curious, all the books are listed in the CIN. Is the CIN software, is that created by CLN or is that an off-the-shelf purchase? If that's okay with the chair, have the director respond.
It's a different topic.
So CIN is the name of the library cooperative. And in that cooperative, they provide some services for the benefit of efficiency and cost. So COHA is the name of the software that we use. And so it is currently provided by CIN, but the software, the catalog, the part that you're seeing on the computer is called COHA. And that is one of the functions of CIN for us. They do courier, we do jointly like overdrive and online access. So CIN provides several benefits. It's essentially an agreement that we will borrow from them and they can borrow from us, and that we've agreed on a set of standards for cataloging, for circulation. So it's, if that explains.
Sure.
So COHA is the name of the software that is the catalog. Trustee Bloss?
So I feel my conversation was
Well,
it's diverted to CIN. I'm just looking for post-fall, or not post-falls, for CLN purchases. What happened this month and what books were bought? And that, I think it's pretty simple. It's probably on a spreadsheet, so.
Okay, so do we have consensus then to ask staff about the feasibility of doing that?
I'm sorry, I've raised my hand several times during this.
Trustee Robinson?
Thank you. Is the trustee asking for all books or children's books or juvenile books? And I would, certain trustees use the words, it's not that hard very often. And I just want to caution that they don't know exactly what it takes for staff to get information that they're asking for. And to say that it can't be that hard, I feel like that's not proper language for a trustee to use at a board meeting. But I do want to know if we're talking about juvenile books, children's books, or all books.
Okay, so if the trustee would like a list of all books purchased each month, do we have consensus on that?
Yes, question.
Well, I don't know what part of all you don't understand. I said all books bought that month by CLN, not CIN. I just don't know what we're spending our money on, what we're buying. So I would like that.
Trustee Hammond?
The only reason I asked about the CIN, I'm sorry. Only reason I asked about the CIN is because I'm curious, that's got a catalog of all the books. Can there be a column, and is there a column that shows when a book was put into the catalog? Because I'm sure the staff is using the CIN, the software, to manage the entire collection. And so they must know, I would assume, when a book was purchased and why a book is being removed. So I thought, well, if there's a column or a column is hidden and not showing, they can show when a book was put into the system. That would, I would assume, effortlessly provide the information that Trustee Bloss was looking for. So that's all I have.
Okay, our time is up for this discussion. Do you have something real quick?
Again, I just point out the board to the circulation or the statistics that you get every month. It shows that we've had 2,472 books added to the collection year to date, and it shows what our monthly additions are as well. I think it's important for trustees to understand that our collection is both physical as well as digital. And so again, when you say all here, do you mean overdrive? Do you mean digital? Do you mean physical books? So clarity in that. And then I would also just characterize this is an appropriate level of responsibility for trustees and oversight. And what you're asking for is what I believe very operational in nature. So again, policy setting, this means appropriate.
Sure. All right, so our time is up for that. We can bring it up again So, and we'll now break for 5 minutes. When we come back, we will be going into a session. I want to let people know. All right, the break is over. That will be voting on your executive session. So the title is executive session, Idaho Code 74-206-1B, to consider the evaluation, dismissal, or your complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent of public student. Yeah, and that was a typo, so it's 1B. So it's 206 1B. Or well, 7.
I move that the board goes into executive session in accordance with Idaho Code 74-2061B to consider the evaluation, dismissal, or discipline of or hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent or public school student.
Okay, so there, oh geez, now I can't remember. Is there discussion on executive session? But these are, or did we just do a roll call vote? Okay, if there is, all right, it has been moved to go into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 74-206-1B to consider the evaluation, dismissal, or disciplining of, or to hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent or public school student. If there is no objection, we will go into the roll call vote. Trustee Blatz?
Aye.
Trustee Blank?
Aye.
Trustee Robinson?
Aye.
Trustee Hanley?
Aye.
And Trustee Addison is also an aye, so the ayes have it, and we motion is carried. We'll now go into executive session. Idaho Code 74-206-1B to consider the evaluation, dismissal, or discipline, or to hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent or public school student. And the audience will please leave the room for the executive session. All right, and so our next section is the trustee continuing education. Director X had sent out 2 pages of drafting library policy and library policy best practices from ICFL. So everyone had a chance to read through those. It can be self-explanatory. That's all the time that we have for that. So now we are going to discuss the materials selection policy. So for the materials selection policy, I am, like those who wrote the Idaho Constitution, grateful to Almighty God for our freedom. But with freedom comes responsibility and the obligation of self-restraint, or else we devolve into chaos and sacrificing children's well-being, which leads to tyranny in many cases by the same people and groups who purposely caused the problems and chaos in the first place so that they can swoop in and save the people. As reported in the Blaze, 45 communist schools were read into the congressional record in 1963. Quote, number 24. Eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and free press. Number 25, break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. Number 26, present degeneracy and promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. This is the Gramscian agenda of the long march through the institutions spelled out explicitly. Gradual takeover of the means of communication, and then using those vehicles to debauch the culture and weaken the will of the individual to resist. Today, those few who still have the courage to advocate public morality are denounced and viciously attacked. End quote. These tactics are alive and well in the here and now. It seems one side of the debate would rather burn the institutions down than let conservatives be in charge or make changes to protect children. Sounds like the mostly peaceful protests in 2020 were burning cars and cities are clearly seen in the background. All that being said, in less than 2 minutes and the time being extremely limited, I move to limit discussion speeches to 2 minutes each turn for the remainder of the meeting. There is no debate on motions to limit debate, just a vote. So all those in favor of the motion to limit discussion speeches to 2 minutes each turn for the remainder of the meeting, say aye.
I would like it to be a roll call vote, please.
Okay, we will do that by roll call vote. Trustee Fox? Trustee Blank?
Nay.
Trustee Robinson?
Nay.
Trustee Henley?
Aye.
And Trustee Addison is aye. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. And so we will limit discussion speeches to 2 minutes each turn for the remainder of the meeting. All right. Oh, okay. Thank you. I don't know how to use it.
I've got it going. I've got it going.
Okay. So you're gonna do the 2 minute timing?
Wait,
No.
can we hear legal counsel? It says legal counsel.
Yeah, isn't it legal counsel's turn?
Oh. I didn't skip over that. I apologize.
That's 2 minutes.
That's actually, no, that's for discussion speeches. This is a presentation, so.
15 minutes. And it also says questions, so.
Okay. So for the benefit of the public as well, I provided a case to here. It's State versus Watts. We discussed it a little bit last time. It's from the Supreme Court of Utah. Its site is 2021 UT 60 or 498 P3D 365. And this is from the Supreme Court of Utah. And it should be easily accessible online. If you type those numbers in, you'd be able to get a copy yourself and review it. The reason this case is important is because the federal law essentially overlays a floor of the protective rights that we have, and the state can have more stringent requirements. And Idaho doesn't have a case like this yet. And so this one is very instructive on what type of rationale the Idaho Supreme Court would use, because it has a very similar set of code at issue. And the facts here was that some photos and some comments were made to a minor, and there was a criminal charge brought, and the court was discussing what constitutes obscenity as to minors. And so I provided this case so we could review it more in our off time, but there's a couple of important quotes in here, I think, that relate to the material selection policy that will help guide the direction we're going. And that is that the United States Supreme Court has held and reaffirmed that sexual conduct is unnecessary in obscenity cases dealing with minors, so long as the allegedly obscene material depicts sexual, explicit, or erotic nudity. So that's interesting for our purposes because the adult standard is different from the minor standard. And then there can be different standards within minors as well, based upon age appropriateness. And so the main thing that I want to make sure that we're doing here is that we understand we have a material selection policy if it applies to all minors, meaning under 18, or if there's a bifurcation of the age groups that it applies to. Because if we just limit to all minors, what's explicit, there could be material available to younger children that's inappropriate. Vice versa, if we limit all minors to the standard of what's inappropriate to very young children, then there's material that's not legally inappropriate for the older age groups, 13, 14, 15 and up. That's typically where you're going to see legal liability. If you take the standard for all minors all the way down to the youngest age group and apply that in the material selection policy. So that's the broad framework upon which we need to make sure that any changes we make are very dialed in. Okay. And then the second concern that I have with the process is that we need to make sure we take into account several of these other policies, and I have a list of them that I would like the board to consider moving forward. The first policy is children in the library. That was approved on February 14th, 2019. The second one would be the computer use policy, 10/21/2019. The internet use safety policy, February 18, 2021, specifically internet use safety policy is a helpful guide because the courts have routinely recognized the states and political subdivisions authority to restrict what can be accessed on the internet. It's a very helpful guide when it comes to the rest of the materials. Library cards for minors policy as well needs to be considered in tandem with the material selection policy. And any changes we make should contemplate that. The library exhibit space should be considered. The citizens' request for the reconsideration of material will likely be impacted, the process at least. The material selection policy itself contains components that, if they're not replaced, will fall away and leave a gap. And the last one is the social media and networking sites policy. So that provides kind of a broad overlay of the pond. And when we're changing the material selection policy, we're throwing a pebble in the pond, right? And so we want to make sure that we're not displacing these other policies by disturbing the pond too violently. So with that being said, I think overall that the material selection policy is a really good start, a really good draft. It's kind of dramatically different than the one we have in place. And so I wouldn't recommend approving it as it is right now because we have some gaps. If we approve the one we have, that leaves a couple of items that we would need to replace that the current material selection policy has in it that the proposed amended draft does not. And the second item that I would call out that is not a glaring deficiency, but one that would cause us to be tripped up is the language of in whole or in part. And that is a concern due to what we see in Watts, where historically the Ginsburg case, the Miller versus California case, and how those have amended the original Roth case was that the Supreme Court considers the context of the work important, and it could lead to too much discretion on behalf of a government agent, like a director or an individual person making collection decisions, to target a specific part of a work without considering the context with which it's presented. And so with that being said, I will just state the tests as we think they are right now. And it's not clear because as State v. Watts says, it's a tortured history. And this is an open federal question. And so that presents additional liability. National nonprofits and NGOs would be looking for an opportunity to take a good case all the way up to the Supreme Court. So we need to assure that we are not one of those defendants. So under the Miller decision, the material is obscene where the average person applying contemporary community standards would find that the work taken as a whole appeals to the prurient interest. 2, the work depicts or describes in a patently offensive way sexual conduct specifically defined by the applicable state law. And the work taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. And so that's why I took exception to removing the "and" last time on the test, because it's 3 and it's not disjunctive, it's conjunctive. And then the final very critical thing that the board should consider is that this is a very state law specific analysis, because the court has reiterated a strong and abiding interest in youth. The state has that, and the states can regulate the dissemination of materials to minors, even when the state clearly could not regulate the same material to adults. So the court, in its last opinion, has reiterated that the decision in Miller makes clear different laws may be applied by states to material disseminated to children. So it can be more restrictive. It doesn't require an overt sexual conduct requirement, but it does need to be age appropriate, and it does need to ensure that we are restricting non-obscene materials to the older age groups. So that's a lot. Understand. I'll leave that open for questions if you're wondering these questions.
Trustee Robinson?
Thank you, counsel. So I had a question to you that I had sent. Putting the existing policy right next to this draft, what is the difference? And what are these loopholes that we keep hearing about that needs to be closed? And does the new one close a loophole in the old one? I guess bottom line, I want to know what's the difference between the two policies besides the old one has the reconsideration in it, and it's, in my opinion, much more clear.
That's a doozy. Well, I think, I don't know if I'm prepared to answer the loophole question right now.
Well, like, you did get my email, right? So you can just answer that, like, putting them side by side, what is the difference?
Well, I think that this is a material selection policy and it's very specific. And so I don't think it contemplates those other elements related to reconsideration or books that are already in circulation. And so to me, it looks like this one's more targeted and more trimmed out. So if you have a circle, it's only 40% of the circle. It's not the entire circle.
Right, but what would the difference be with the two policies of a book coming into the library? Would the new policy change the ability for a book to come in over the old policy? Not, we don't even have to talk about the reconsideration. Would it change a book coming in?
I think it could, but I don't know if it practically would right now, the way it stands, because it doesn't appear to me that it has a bill. It leaves a lot of discretion, I think, to the director to make those age appropriate determinations still. It doesn't appear like that's very precisely delineated yet. I think we were still kind of working through that process. So that's something that I would encourage the board to dial in more is set a policy that the director could then apply related to what do we think state law says is obscene for each minor age group, right? We don't want to apply one standard to the whole age group because then we're excluding the older levels from reading material that they may have a right to view, especially if it's already in the possession of the library.
Okay, very last question.
Okay.
Do you see a big problem with the existing one?
I do. I see the two big problems that we have because it's a draft are the
existing policy.
Oh, the existing policy. It's hard for me to answer a question that's characterized as, do I see a big problem with the policy? I could slice and dice anything.
Okay.
I think it's adequate.
Okay.
Policy is adequate, but we can always improve. And then the last bit of context I would put this in is that we are going to be facing legislative changes. And so we need to be mindful of, is there a policy amendment we can make that will protect staff as well? Because we don't want staff being responsible for making decisions that could implicate criminal law.
Right.
And so I would like to see that aspect incorporated into the policy a little bit more strongly. And I do think that we can improve the one we're working on as long as we're taking into account that it's not part of this comprehensive poll that we have currently, right? So this one material selection policy you have fits in with the rest of those that I read. So I just want to make sure if we're changing that, we supplement any of those other policies to match.
Right.
Sure.
Thank you.
Trustee Boss?
So what I made notes of is sounded like the main thing, or there's two things with this that you're a little bit concerned about, but one is the adding the in part. And my question on that is where the court said got into detail of what we can buy. We're not talking about what we remove. So we're just talking about the books we buy. Why would the court even step in and say, you have to buy a certain book? And that's what it seems like that would be. And then the second part is, why do we need to have a delineation by age of these definitions? We just made definitions of, or got in here definitions of nudity, sexual conduct. Why would that definition change with age? So 2 questions.
I'm interpreting that policy currently to be the minimum for obscenity to minors that's unlawful in the state. So if it is this, you can't disseminate it, except there's an exception for the libraries and the schools, right? So it's not the graduated policy that you can implement, right? And so if you just restrict the minimum of what is obscene, then you're leaving open policymaking authority on other levels that you could potentially restrict. So there's different layers of what is obscene depending on what age group it is. And so I think that we need to have that flavor in the policy, so we're not just saying this is obscene to minors, right? Because it's not just this is obscene to minors, it's this is obscene to minors of this age and this age and this age. And oh, by the way, here's the state, this is obscene to minors, the total standard for their criminal law. So you can have that blanket provision, but we need to keep in mind that there's a graduated analysis that the court will conduct, especially if someone brings an access to information claim or something like that. I know we're talking material selection, but that comes right out of Miller, where the obscenity analysis focuses on the work taken as a whole, because you have to consider, is there a scientific, a literary, other type of
even to buy it?
I think there are going to be restrictions on how the director as a government agent essentially makes the decision, and if she can't make it on a viewpoint, or, if she's targeting some type of sexual conduct because of a personal animus, she wouldn't be able to do that. So it could implicate it.
And implementation is very tricky.
Yeah.
So I'm concerned about implementation,
Yeah.
which you haven't really talked about, but I think opens another door to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, so our time is up with,
Wait,
again.
this is a big, important topic.
I know, and I was going to say that. Just wanted to let everyone know again that if we extend to every section, that we will have to extend the meeting at the end. So go ahead, Trustee Blank.
So I think you answered these, but I had them. Does this policy make us more legally vulnerable than the one that is already in place in any way? And that specifically, does it limit, does it do something to limit what the library would access? So I, as a patron, would ask for this book, and because of this policy, would be told that it can't be purchased. Does this policy make us more legally vulnerable in that way than the old policy? And I don't know if you can answer that. But
Certainly, if we leave the in whole or in part language in there, I think that could lead to a challenge.
okay, so this policy with that part, there are parts of it that may leave us legally more vulnerable, so we have to be careful.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lack of case law specifically relating to minors. And so I see a graph like this, and on the one hand, you have how aggressive you are with your definitions related to obscenity, and the other graph is how big your probability of litigation is. And so you'd want to make sure you're picking a healthy conservative margin there.
My other question is, it's absolutely about the implementation. Can staff clearly implement this policy and clearly know that they're not breaking the law? So I don't know if that's exactly the right question, but, implementation it doesn't seem like it's very clear for staff to implement it. And I don't know if that's a question for the director or if that's a legal question.
We haven't had that conversation yet after we, receive the updated draft, but certainly think that'd be appropriate. Have that conversation.
Okay. So
I'd like to move that we table this discussion because we really need to have the withdrawal at the same time. So I would move that we table this discussion on this material selection policy until next meeting.
This doesn't
Yeah,
have.
actually, so right now we're on the legal counsel section.
Oh.
I messed up by reading my material selection policy too early.
I withdraw.
And we're over time. So next we will move to the discussion on materials selection policy. If you wanted to make that motion now, that would be appropriate.
If we have time, let's continue with our discussion then. So I'm not going to make the motion.
Okay, Trustee Blake.
Just because it has action item doesn't mean we have to. We can agree to continue the discussion. Just by consensus, if that's what we want to do. I would be delighted if we continue the discussion, especially hearing from council that we still have some places where we are legally vulnerable. And I'm not even talking about the content of it. I just don't want us to be legally vulnerable because we can't afford it.
Okay, so I guess we could see who knows where in the draft material selection policy the part about in whole or in part is at. Maybe we can just go with that real quick.
Page 2.
Okay, page 2, what section?
Actually, it's the very bottom of page 1.
Bottom of page 1?
The last line.
Oh, okay. All right, so should we just by consensus take out the part or in part? Those words there at the last sentence on page 1. Trustee Henley?
So I guess the question is for legal counsel is if you make it a piece of material needs to be looked at as a whole, does that mean, is there some kind of a percentage of how much scene we're allowed to have in a piece of material before it crosses that threshold? Because, taken as a whole, you can have a really filthy couple paragraphs or chapters. And well, the book as a whole is very redeeming and it's a good piece of stuff there. It's very artistic and therefore it passes the test. So that's why I did write that in there, I think, or without wanting to means in part. So where do we depart from in part to as a whole? To me, it's a difficult threshold to understand.
So if you look at page 8, it's the bottom, the bottom paragraph 37 on the page, trustee. Yes. Page 8 of the case, State v. Watts. It's a quote, "This is clear regarding contextual from the Supreme Court case law introducing the taken as a whole language. For example, in Roth, the court warned against making an obscenity determination based on an isolated excerpt of the material. And in Coy v. Wisconsin, the court quoted the taken as a whole language before explaining that this analysis of necessity required courts to look at the context of the material as well as its content. In Coy, the court considered whether a small image depicting a nude man and woman embracing in a seated position in a poem describing sex were obscene. As part of its analysis, the court noted that the image appeared as a part of a newspaper article discussing the state's enforcement of an obscenity law, because the images were similar to the image seized in the state obscenity action discussed in the article, and because in the context in which they appeared in the newspaper, they were rationally related to an article that itself was clearly entitled to First Amendment protection. The court determined the images were not obscene. And then they quote another case about a poem describing sex and a 2-page spread consisting of 11 poems. And the court felt the poem bore some of the earmarks of an attempt at serious art. And for this reason, the court concluded that the dominant theme of the poem did not appeal to the prurient interest in sex. And so they demonstrate a proper obscenity analysis necessarily requires courts to consider the context in which the allegedly obscene material appears. And so this is a general concept too, and there's not really a lot of obscene to minors cases construing what the Roth and the Ginsburg and the Miller courts have said about obscenity analysis generally. So we have to guess what the rationale will be related to context and obscene for minors. So I think very much so that the court will not abandon the contextual analysis when they're analyzing obscenity as to minors. And so that's specifically the implementation concern I think the director has, is she's going to have to interpret, does this policy that says taken apart or in whole or in part, what does that mean? And she could certainly take that policy and ratchet it back to the federal requirements. But if it leaves open to her to make that decision, that's where we can get into trouble, because we don't want her arbitrary. And I'm not saying the director
That's
would.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
too. I don't want.
We don't want her making that decision sort of arbitrarily. We don't want the next director or the next staff member taking a different approach. So that's generally the answer to the question. And I'm not aware of a case that I could say harmful to minors, obscenity analysis, how the court is construing Miller related to context. You know, I haven't found it yet. There's some district court stuff, but they're not necessarily binding. They're our best guess. So conservative approach is don't abandon the contextual analysis.
Sure.
And class?
So if I read what these footnotes are saying is the only way we know if it's not good or that it's obscene in whole is we have to have a court look at the book. So each book has to have a court case. And if it doesn't have a court case, we can't decide that. Is that what you're hinting at?
You can absolutely decide it. What my job is to try and make sure you don't patently and facially decide a non-obscene book is obscene or an obscene book is not obscene. So if you're looking at an obscene book is 7%, you know, erotic nudity, but 93% literary and artistic, my advice isn't going to be pick 6.8%, right? It will be, let's go with 4, right? So that way we're not pushing the limit or you know what I mean? You're not over the limit of state action in violation of a person's rights related to obscenity.
And I just wanted, I'm sure what you mean by what you just said, you were not talking about children's books of 7% erotic text.
Well,
I just want to make sure that you have a chance to say that you're not talking about children's books.
Well, no, because the cases aren't really specific to children either. So we have mostly related to adult context, right? And so I apologize if I stick with that theme, but no, I'm not accusing anyone of having erotic nudity in a children's book. Just for purposes of argument, if we were going to say this nude depiction or this nude phraseology was erotic or was appealing to the prurient interest, how much of that's contained in the book? And if you could say it's a percentage, which doesn't really make sense, and then we know a court says this book is, and it had 7%, right? Then we don't know the extent to what the court would, is it 4%? Is it 10%? So I'm saying, let's take our best guess, contextual analysis, look at the tradition, and then pick a healthy margin there and dial the policy in there.
Sure.
Trustee Laws?
So what I'm hearing is, I guess, 2 things. One, you're suggesting we have better definition of or in part, comma, not more than 5% of the paragraphs or 10%. I mean, you want us to define what in part, what the limit is. And I guess the other question is, why would the court say that we have to buy a certain kind of book? I don't think they're going around saying this, and I guess more in general, this really doesn't just apply to children's book. If this is saying we can't buy a book like this and put it in the non-adult section. That's, I believe that's in there. So if there's an adult book that is written for 19-year-olds or characters, this would still apply, that definition of who's 10% would still apply. You can't put it in the minor section. That's what this policy is talking about. It's not just talking about whether it's a children's book or not. Any book that has this, we're not going to buy and put it in the children's section or the minor section.
I just have a kind of real life scenario for people. So what if I receive a request from a community member to purchase a book that says that its intended audience is 17 to 20-year-olds? And I review it and determine that it has some sexual content as defined by the policy in part or in whole, whatever. But I say it's obscene, we're not purchasing it, and I deny that purchase request. What kind of consequence would occur to the district potentially? Like,
Well,
I'm determining it's obscene, I'm not purchasing it because of its sexual content.
I think that you could run afoul, one, on making an obscenity determination that overlaps a minor analysis and an adult analysis. And so you'd have to do two analysis there related to obscenity, because you have, can you say this book is obscene for an 18-year-old and up, right? And that's a different question than, is it obscene to minors? And so I wouldn't advise that you take that age group and do one analysis on it. And so the conclusion would likely be wrong one way or the other. So more than likely it's permissible for an adult. Like, there's hardly anything that wouldn't be, right, except for sexual conduct with the nudity, which is typically the Miller standard, with all the caveats we discussed. But for the children, it would be, if it's obscene to minors under the state law, then it would be prohibited, right? But that's a different analysis too, between what's obscene between the younger ones and the older ones. So we would be on that very top ratchet of the least restrictive for the 17-year-old, which is practically any difference from an adult. So that's actually a really complicated question.
Well, and again, it kind of points out, I don't know that we could implement this without someone with legal experience reviewing every decision that's on the line in order to purchase books. I don't feel comfortable making that legal determination at this point. I don't have any formal training in it. I'm having to interpret statutes. And now not only I have to do that, but every person that's a librarian on my staff now has to have that level of expertise.
I think you're already doing that though too. And one of my concerns is with the potential new legislation, that we should have a conversation about how we would deal with that and what changes it would mean for the staff, right? Because we could model off what they attempted to pass last year, and if they do have the super majority veto override, we're going to have some sort of plan to deal with that. And that's not probably what would be a small undertaking for you, right? You barely.
It's significant, and you listen to how many other policies that this now goes into.
Yeah, I think we should continue to work on it, and I think I want more streamlined answer to your question, the side by side, and that will help us identify what components are affecting that other policy. And one of the things that isn't in here is the weeding issue. And that makes sense if you're just doing a material selection policy only, but there is a quasi selection thought process that goes into weeding. Right?
Deselection,
Yeah.
it's term.
Yeah, so it's.
Oh, sorry, who was first?
Oh,
Trustee Blank?
are we looking to modify in part, or are we looking to remove it? Are you, I mean, I heard you say we need, basically, it isn't in, I read this, thank you for giving it to us. And, you know, it looks like we are not in good shape if we add or in part. But people are looking on this board to find another way to say it. It doesn't seem to me like there's any other way to say it. We need to keep in whole. I mean, are we trying to modify that in whole?
I don't know if I have, heard board members say they want to target material for like a specific image. Maybe that there's an inappropriate work for an inappropriate age is more how I'm interpreting it. But I wouldn't abandon the contextual analysis the court will likely employ. So we would like our analysis for selection to be closely mirrored to what the court will do.
Which is in whole.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
well, it's the Miller test plus in the obscenity for minors realm, which we're not sure what the court will find yet. And that's the three elements I read earlier that do require that context to be considered, and whether it's literary or scientific, it has a redeeming quality as well.
And that is, those three are in our policy, is that not correct?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
If we go back to the as a whole instead of as in part. And then we say any book for minors, was targeted toward minors, if it does have obscenity in it, in part, it's not to be made available to them without going through to an adult to get access to it. Would that keep us from? So there are a lot of sleazy books out there for minors. And if we buy the book because we're required to look at the book as a whole, but we do purchase the book so we don't get sued, and we put it in an area where the minors don't have access to it unless they go through an adult. Would that be a way to go around it? I don't know.
Right, good answer.
Okay. I think we need to look at the, that's a different issue because that's access to a book we currently have, and so that would be different than selection. And that would probably affect a library card for our minors. And then in State v. Watts, we do have a paragraph here where the court notes that parents and others who hold the primary responsibility for minors' well-being are entitled to the support of laws designed to aid discharge of that responsibility. The court also recognized that the state has an independent interest to protect the welfare of children and to see that they are safeguarded from abuses which might prevent their growth into free and independent, well-developed citizens. And so what you can't do is restrict something that is not obscene to minors, that threshold that applies statewide, that a parent could otherwise access. Does that make sense? So if it's not obscene to minors, but it may be inappropriate for a certain age group, then you couldn't require that parent to take an extra step to provide that to their children. And so I think that's what the library card targets. And so I would put that analysis on maybe the library card policy, or some other creative way where you have where you put your books, right? Because you already have an age group where you put them.
And I'll just mention, we are creating shelves for collections for 15 to 17-year-olds, or 13 to 15-year-olds. And then 16, 15 and 16. So we already are in that process and should have it by the end of the year, where this tiering of appropriateness for age is being implemented. And that was part of that card process.
Okay, so our time is be moving on. We have any ideas on what we want to do with that taken out of the Walmart card, or just move on? Rated. So next we have the discussion on materials withdrawal and reconsideration policy. Trustee Glass.
I move that we approve sequentially the PLOS draft of the materials withdrawal reconsideration policy and send to legal counsel for review. I got it written out here for you.
Hey, sorry, these chairs don't bother me at all.
Okay, it has been moved that we approve sequentially the clause draft of materials withdrawal and reconsideration policy and send to legal counsel for review. So that business has now been brought before the board. That's Lane.
What does the term, sequentially mean? I mean, we're going, okay,
That's legal or official or,
we're going section by section, is that what we're doing?
sequentially
Does
in order.
Okay, section by section. I was limited in my discussion last time because I was trying to talk about, I was limited to only talking about that paragraph. I couldn't talk about how it related to the rest of the policy. I couldn't talk about how it fit in with the policy as a whole. I don't mind at all going section by section, but being limited to not seeing how it fits in with the entire policy is too limiting. So I'm happy to do it that way. I'm happy to move forward. I don't even know if it needed a motion. But it, just as we were talking about a minute ago, it has, these sections aren't standalone. They need to be looked at as how does it work with the entire policy and how does it work with other policies? And so I would certainly support that motion if we can have a robust discussion.
Chair, I'd like to present the first section. So this is in red, the first sentence, the opening sentence. This policy defines community libraries network review criteria.
I'm sorry, isn't there a motion on the floor?
Yes, and we're doing it sequentially. The first,
Yes.
first is.
Oh, are we?
Wait,
Well, we're starting at the beginning.
has not been moved.
I moved it and it's on the table.
So
Point of order, point of order. This is on the table, Chair.
Okay, so in a small board, normally we discuss and then we make a motion, but we're not prohibited from following Robert's rules. And so a motion actually brings the business before the board. So in this case, the business before the board would be going through the class draft sequentially, and then eventually sending it to legal review. But well, we have discussion.
Yeah, but he started doing it sequentially. We haven't voted on it.
You don't vote. It's on the table. It's the process.
Okay, well, actually,
Yeah, let them
Point
object.
of order,
Let them
the
object.
motion, we have a motion. And we need to address that motion, or the motion needs to be withdrawn. But discussion of the policy is not what it is. We're discussing the motion.
that is, I believe, the business that has been brought before the board is class draft, considered sequentially. Anyway.
So.
Are we going to do that is the question.
Chair,
Actually,
point of order. All they can do is
sorry.
they can call for a vote on the motion if we're going to do it or not. There's no debate. This is.
Sharon, can we have council step in and clear this up? Because obviously somebody's rights and other people are wrong.
This is a matter of Robert's rules rather than a legal. It's not a legal question. It's a Robert.
Well, somebody needs to clear it up. That's what I'm saying.
It's right here, section 28. You can read it, Tom.
Yeah, when you make a motion, you bring that business before the board. So the business before the board is going through the class draft sequentially. Although actually, I think it's section 28(4) of Robert's rules. It says that the chair can actually just decide to do that for any long or complicated motions where the motion is actually considered to be the policy draft in this case. So
Which is clarify, I was not sure what one, so there were multiple versions included in the packet. So I don't know that it was clear your intention to make one in advance, the primary one. I think everybody, in fact, is in agreement that they want to go through that version in that order, with the only exception is that at the beginning or the end, people can comment as a whole or at some point. So I would recommend just withdrawing the motion and then just moving forward. I think you have consensus.
yeah,
No, the motion's on the table and the motion is to go through it. And the first part of it is the first sentence. This policy defines community libraries, networks review criteria and disposition process for the material to be removed from the collection.
okay,
We
actually,
can have discussion now.
I'm going to move a division of question, meaning that we divide this into two separate questions. So that what the first question would be, I move that we approve sequentially the class draft of the materials withdrawal and reconsideration policy. And the second question that would be approved later would be, I move that we send to legal counsel for review. So there's no debate on a division of the question, and so we will now vote on whether we should make that two separate questions, which I think would address your guys' concern.
Could you read the first one again?
I move that we approve sequentially the class draft of the materials withdrawal and reconsideration policy.
So you're asking us to actually approve this right now?
No, actually, we have to vote on the division of the question first. Are we going to divide it into two questions? So I call the question, I call a previous question. So we're going to vote on whether to divide this up into two questions that I asked. So
Can you repeat the question again? Because the first division, it says approve. Is that correct? I'm sorry. I certainly would move to discuss, but approve?
I approve it for, it says draft in there. So we're just approving it for the draft. So, okay, so we're gonna vote on whether we're dividing the question. So all those in favor of dividing this into two questions, say aye.
Aye.
Nay. I'm gonna say nay, because I don't think it's clear.
So I also have some like clarity about what we're sending to legal. Is it after we've reviewed it? And
Yeah, that would be a second question that we would get to later.
But
after we've gone
looking
through
for
it.
that approval with the splitting. So that part isn't kind of
Approving the draft.
But again, it's like the current one that we have or the one that we've worked through and then definitely any changes.
Chair.
Sure.
Thank you. Could we possibly have this motion withdrawn and just discuss this draft?
Sequentially.
Trustee Bloss?
No, I'm not withdrawing it. This is discussing it. This is the process called out in Robert's rules for discussing a document. You go through it paragraph by paragraph, section by section. We make comments, we amend the section, we have discussion on it. We approve by consensus or vote on each paragraph. That's all we're doing is we're going through it. It's on the table. We can only talk about what's on the table. So let us proceed.
Look, I think it's just a fundamental misunderstanding the difference between the normal small boards rules, which doesn't preclude all the rest of Robert's rules, and what they do in all other assemblies that are larger is that when you make a motion, you are bringing that business before the assembly. Trustee Blank.
I would just like to say this board operates under small board rules, and small board rules allows discussion before a motion is made, and that is the easier way to do it. And it would really be helpful, because I'm afraid if we pass this motion, it's got the word approve in it, and we're going to be in a world of hurt.
Trustee Bloss.
the motion is to approve to send it to legal counsel. We're not approving anything for policy at this point. So the motion is on the table. It doesn't need to have a question divided. It's okay if you do. When we're done, we then vote. We vote to send it to legal counsel as amended. But at this point, we have to go through each section. It's on the table. This is what we have to do. We can only talk about the section we're talking about at the time.
Trustee Hammy?
Is it to review, approve tentatively and forward to legal? Is that my understanding? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Is that what this motion allows?
Same as last time, we're only approving to send it to legal. We're not approving it as in this is now the policy, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's different.
That is,
So the first,
all right, so.
I don't think you need to.
I withdraw my motions. We'll go back to the original motion and deal with it as Robert's rules in section 28. It says, to deal with it, we now have before us, the business of the board is to approve sequentially the last draft of the materials withdrawal and reconsideration policy and send to legal counsel for review. I do have one correction though. You wanted to start with that first sentence. I would actually start with the title. In my mind, it sounds like it should be materials withdrawal. So just add an AL at the end of withdrawal instead of having materials withdraw and reconsideration policy. That sounded weird to me. Anyone else? Trustee Hanley?
I wanted to change the sequence of it. It'd be reconsideration, withdrawal, and disposition. And in the same way, when we get into the draft itself, the content, we rearrange those paragraphs. It would be sequentially, it would seem to be more logical to reconsider than to withdraw and or dispose rather than, so I think it's really got three major chunks in there. Those are the three things we have. Discussion on reconsideration material, discussion on withdrawal of materials or weeding, and then there's a discussion on disposition of materials. So I just think it's a more logical flow within the context of the thing, and maybe that should probably be reflected in the actual title of the policy.
Trustee Fox?
So I don't follow you on your change because withdrawal is the very first section.
No, the title.
I know in the retirement,
Okay.
you were saying something else, but the very first section that we go through is withdrawal of materials. And Tom or Trustee Hanley wanted to put something else ahead of withdrawal. If I were to go change the title, I would follow the sequence of the policy, which says withdrawal, disposition, and reconsideration.
You're what?
I'm indifferent. I'm not going to beat up the sequence. I just thought that was a more logical sequence. Before you get rid of something, you gotta kind of consider it first. Then you can withdraw it, then you can dispose of it if you wish. But and again, I thought that the paragraphs inside the actual policy should be rearranged into that sequence. I just think it makes more sense, but I can live with either way.
Okay, it makes more sense to me to have it in the order that the policy does, but so are we, and yeah, other than that, I don't really care. But the withdrawal, does that make sense to other people?
Yes.
Okay, so do we have consensus on changing withdraw to withdrawal?
I would just say that I still prefer it as one policy where it's all selection and everything. So,
Okay. All right, thank you for your input. Okay, so we're changing withdrawal and not changing the order of the title, so then we move on. Without objection, we move on to the next section, which is that first sentence. Okay, is everyone okay with that first sentence that says this policy defines the community library network's review criteria and disposition process for material to be removed from the collection? Objections? Okay, so we have, raise your hand, you are good with that?
Good.
Okay, all right, so that's consensus. We're gonna leave that sentence as is. All right, It's the whole rest of that page that's been stuck through and in yellow. Actually, in the next page also does not apply to a materials withdrawal and reconsideration policy. So do we have consensus to remove all of the yellow strike through sections on page 1 and 2?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay, so we have consensus on that. Next census, next section would be the withdrawal of materials, which is as is from the original policy. Trustee Hanley?
I would like to modify the last sentence. It reads, criteria for selecting materials for a withdrawal include, I would rather add in there withdrawal or relocation include, because farther into this thing, we talk about relocating materials. So I would suggest it reads criteria for selecting materials for withdrawal or relocation include.
Okay. Sounds good to me. Trustee Robinson?
I don't really care that much on that point, but I don't think any of those bullet points, I mean, lack of user space, you wouldn't put it somewhere else. You get rid of it. Damaged in poor condition, you wouldn't put it somewhere else. You just get rid of it. I think all the bullet points point to you would get rid of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't really matter if the other word is there, but I don't see a need for it.
Yeah, actually, withdrawal would indicate removal from the library. No? Okay. Okay.
I have some thoughts on this section. I did review the crew manual a little bit more, and this is very succinct. But I'll read a little bit of a section that we could also add. And I've expressed some concern that our current policy doesn't address our digital materials and e-materials. And so there is a crew method that does specifically outlines the criteria for e-materials. So I consider that for inclusion. But after the portion about method to keep collection reading, I would consider under this method criteria for selecting materials for withdrawal to include date, author, publisher, physical condition, additional copies available, availability of similar books within the collection, expensive replacement, shelf time without circulation, and community relevance. Materials of poor appearance, worn out, poorly bound, rebound editions, items that are dirty, shabby, warped, bug infested, books that with small print or poor quality pictures, scratched DVDs, media that is beaten up, books with yellow, brittle, torn, taped, or missing pages, books with dust jackets or cover art that is dated. Content of materials will be reviewed for outdated and obsolete information, trivial subject matter, mediocre writing style, inaccurate or false information, unused sets, repetition series, suspended editions, resources that are not standard lists, materials that contain biased, racist, or sexist terminology or views, unneeded duplicates, self-published or small press materials that are not circulating. And the two major reasons for reading e-materials is primarily low use and outdated content.
I think that's right.
Yeah, and I get, this is directly from the cruise method. It's a 150-page document that we're citing and that we have 5 bullet points for. So I think that more accurately reflects what librarians' work is. And again, I think it adds to this element that we're not deleting materials based on content. It's based on material format, use, data-driven items.
Okay, yeah, so it already says that we use, or that the collection development library and other staff use the crew. Yeah, so that's already included.
There's a crew for ebooks and e-materials and there's additions to it. And like I said, I would prefer in the policy that the board is adopting that they're recognizing that these are more specifically the basis on which we're reading.
Trustee Hemming?
I definitely had my hand up first.
I'm sorry, I didn't see.
Yeah, I know, that's a little bit of a problem. So I need to ask about this. So is the suggestion, being made by the director that we include specifically those words?
These were mainly from a summary from the crew method, but I think it's much more illustrative than just damage report condition. It's talking specifically about the damage and condition, the obsolescence, the lack of space, availability. So it is expanding on what we currently have. And it also adds e-materials, which I think is relevant. The policies currently do not address, and physical condition of an e-material is irrelevant. It's not a factor. And so making that distinction that the basis that we're reading e-materials is not based on content, it's based on use and outdated materials.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yes.
I think from a legal standpoint, I think that would be better to include e-materials and specific reasons.
Okay, I have a little bit more
Sorry,
of
the
my,
director had the floor and.
wait a second, I had
Trustee
more to my question.
Yeah, we need to get better at,
I needed that
If someone else-
information to be able to ask the question or to make the statement. Could I just finish this?
if you can finish it quickly.
It seems to me that if the director is asking for something that specific, that it is really good for the community to have an understanding of what's being removed and why. And it's really great for staff, just incredible for staff to know what to remove. So I would certainly be supportive of anything that would help clarify to staff what to do from a policy.
Response.
So this section already refers through, as you said, I don't think we need to add all those words in, but I do think, unless I'm misunderstanding, we're missing the definition of materials. And that was in the other policy that we just talked about. I wouldn't mind adding a section defining materials unless this policy is someplace referring back to the other one. Is that, did I miss someplace? I don't think we're actually defining materials. And in that case, I would add e-materials.
Yeah, aren't there's the physical materials, budget line, and then there's also a, electronic materials budget line. So I mean, that's kind of understood that even if they're electronic, they're still materials.
The policy we were talking about earlier with legal counsel has a section that says, quote, material means book, magazine, newspaper, pamphlet, poster, print, picture, figure, image, description, motion picture, film, record, recording tape, CD, ROM, disc, magnetic disc, memory, magnetic tape, memory, videotape, or other media, which I would add any downloadable or online digital content. But that we could take that definition of material and add it right here, if it's not clear what material, but I don't want to add the whole through section.
Okay, so you would like to add the exact same materials definition as from the other.
Yeah, just cut and paste it in here, or maybe in a section right above raw materials. But
Okay.
You would simply say materials as described in the material selection policy.
Yeah.
Instead of repeating the entire description.
Yep.
Materials as described. Material selection policy. Okay, so that would just be a one line subject heading? Or materials defined as described in the material selection policy? Mr. Robinson?
In the selection policy, I didn't think that any of the definitions should be in there. And I don't think it needs to be said in here. It is literally a library, and it's the material withdrawal and reconsideration policy. That means the materials that are housed or the air of a library.
And also, I would assume, is library of things. Do we need to, put in all the different library of things into the description of materials? It's obvious. It's material withdrawal and reconsideration policy.
Response?
So instead of another section, I would just add that sentence right after the first sentence. But we can come back, since we already approved that, we can come back at the end and do that. And not make a section, just add materials as described in the material section policy. Yeah.
Comment that the crew method does not have anything related to puzzles or to some of the other materials that we have of things selection. And so reading that, again, having more descriptions spelled out would be better. And again, the original crew method does not cover e-materials. It's a separate e-materials. So this crew method is not inclusive of what I'm saying needs to be included. And that's why I'm saying more specificity. You can cite the crew method and many of these things, but it's also applicable for those other areas.
Okay, but the crew method, whoever does that, they did put something out to deal with.
I think it's called the crew method for e-materials or e-resources, but there's a crew manual and then there's a crew method for it's a separate, but it is an additional document.
Okay, well, I would think that this would cover that as well, because method is not, it's not capitalized, so it's a general term. Use the crew method. It's general with anything put out by crew. All right, so, all right. So we would put a definite, are we putting a definition or not?
Yep, I suggest we come back at the end and add it to the first sentence that we already did.
Right, because we're doing it sequentially. So right now we're on the withdrawal of materials meeting. Okay, would we accept it as is for now, and we can always come back and change it at the end, because at the end, we'll go through it section by section. At the end, then we'll have a time to discuss anything in the whole policy. So should we accept the withdrawal of materials, reading section as is?
Yes.
Oh, we had, did you still want the relocation in there?
Yeah, I say yes, the relocation
Okay.
part of it.
Right.
And then I had 2 bullets to add to that list.
Okay, well,
If that's where we are.
okay, let's
We're just gonna,
at a time. We have consensus on adding or relocation to that last sentence. Criteria for selecting materials for withdrawal or relocation include. That's how it would read if we accept that. All right, so consensus on that? No? Blake Robinson? No.
No.
Okay, all right, you're not adding that. All right, and you had 2 additional bullet points on the next page?
I suggested that.
Are we in the purple now or the red?
No, we're still in a withdrawal of materials. There's one bullet point that's top of the page.
Yeah, 1 bullet point on the third, page 3. And I was suggesting after community relevance, that we could add either one or both of these materials harmful to minors, or materials that's been identified through the reconsideration process. Because if we're talking about, and again, unless library technical speak is out of line, if we're talking about weeding, I don't know if weeding can include that. Meaning, unless there's an official definition of what weeding is. If there isn't, then besides removing materials because it's damaged or got extra copies and so forth, well, then we remove materials also then possibly if it's been identified through the reconsideration process. So if someone challenges the book and it gets reconsidered and it's actually determined not to be appropriate, would that be appropriate then to have a line in there that says material identified through the consideration process? So I'm just suggesting we add that as another bullet after community relevance.
Okay, so we'll do these one at a time. Materials harmful to minors. Yeah, that's fine.
So I don't think we need to add that because we deal with that down below. We define it and it's in the section on disposition. So we don't need to get into weeding because we're either gonna keep one place or the other, but we're not necessarily removing those. I don't think you want to say anything about removing books harmful to minors. That's what we've been warned about. We don't want to remove those. They just get put into two different sections defined there.
Okay,
But in general, if it's a worn out book, I mean, then it falls under the reading, under the true stuff.
okay, so consensus on that has failed. Okay. And the next one, did you still, or are we, you want to drop that one as well?
Which one are we dropping?
The materials that have been identified through reconsideration process.
Then the other one, if that would be, if it comes under the same situation, materials harmful to minors. Would that be?
That was the one that just got dropped. We're now looking at materials identified through reconsideration process.
And both out there, if they be or to be appropriate in a particular location in this policy.
Okay. I suppose.
I don't think it's necessary because it's just whatever book gets into here is going to go through the weeding process, whether where it comes from or where it's been, it goes through the weeding process.
Okay, trustee Blank.
Oh, I was just, the director had her hand up.
Director.
Again, I would just point out that this is very much the librarian's work where we're determining based on our industry standards what to eliminate from the collection. And again, I don't believe that we should put any kind of content-based or more subjective criteria in that section. I think that makes it confusing to staff. And again, I'll just reinsert that I think more specificity for staff is better. So, but not for physical description or for reasons that are objective. But I would not add a subjective item to that section.
Okay, trustee Blank.
The materials that are identified through the reconsideration process to be removed are just going to be removed. I mean, that doesn't even need to be there. That's not weeding. That's a separate kind of thing. I mean, it's addressed in reconsideration of materials. I don't think we need a separate bullet point for it.
Okay, so consensus has failed then? Okay. The next section is material.
Section owns is.
Oh. Okay, so we're not making changes, then do we have consensus on the entire withdrawal of materials section as it was? Mr. Robbins.
Is this a section where the director suggested more information put in?
Yeah, we can come back.
So are
to
we?
that.
So we're approving it like this, but we're going to come back to it.
Yeah, at the end, we'll go section by section, and at the end, we'll have one more went through. Okay.
We can add it now or vote on it.
Trustee Henning?
So are we saying we would put that entire long list that the director read off in the policy? Or is that just part of the weeding manual or the crew process? All those items under crew, are we talking about putting all those possibly in here?
Well, we wouldn't say, or we aren't saying that we will put them in there or that we won't put them in there, just that we would consider it at a later time. Trustee Plus.
So this is what you're voting now. Is there consensus that we accept it as is? If we had an amendment which we don't right now. I don't believe we're doing anything to. If we had an amendment, we would do a consensus as
We're
amended.
not voting on anything right now.
We're voting on this paragraph. We agreed to take it without changing.
We're doing it by consensus.
So we're over 5 minutes or we're more than 5 minutes? Okay. Okay, well, then, yeah, time is getting short. It seems obvious to me that we are not going to get through this, the rest of it today, so we could just stop there. And move it, maybe table this until, our next meeting. So has been moved to table, this discussion until our next meeting. Actually, we could just do that consensus. I've already got the, never mind. I've already got the motion out there. So all those in favor of tabling it until the next meeting? Okay, well, the ayes have it, and so this discussion is tabled until the next meeting.
I have a suggestion. Are there things that we can move to another meeting rather than staying?
We could probably move the director evaluation policy. And would that be okay with you?
That's what's necessary.
Okay.
And
I was
Chair,
ready for it, but.
Chair, I am so sorry, but I once again went by, and I guess I need to stop doing this. I went by the actual schedule and I have something that I need to be at. So I do need to leave at 5:30. So I'm asking, I would hate to ask for the, where is it? The facility maintenance annual report to be put off. Because I can't ask that, can I? It's a darn shame. I'm gonna miss it.
It is so important.
I know, but I literally plan around these scheduled times.
Brandy's giving us the nod. Thank you. All right, so we will bypass that for now. All right, discussion of CLN fiscal year 2024 board calendar. We wanted to do that post haste.
I'm just in reflection now, on everything that kind of came out about all of our policies that we may need to look at. And so I'm just gonna really recommend that once we get through a little bit more, that we look at what policies we need to review and we put them on a schedule so that, a really realistic and attainable schedule.
Okay, so you make a statement, we're gonna bypass the rest of it.
Can I just add one quick thing to the calendar? Based upon what happened at our meeting today, I would also like us to look at putting on some board training on our calendar as well. When we talk about calendar.
Okay, so yeah, we are now at the section for discussion of future agenda requests. Ms. Robinson.
Could we, it's on the agenda. I don't know if it has to be a policy or if it's something a little looser than that, but something about public etiquette when it comes to sign holding and sign holding. Signs in general. Because of issues that we all heard of.
Okay, do we have consensus on that?
Look at our policy.
Trustee Glass?
I just had another thing, but unless there's something specific, are we just gonna talk about it, or are you gonna present a resolution or what?
Yeah, we would normally just start our conversation about it and see if people think something needs to be done.
And it can, the chair did at the beginning of the meeting, address the audience a bit. I just don't know if it needs to be more, in writing or something, but she did address it today, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I would like to discuss it further. Okay, so that's 3. Are there any no's?
No.
Okay, we have a consensus that public etiquette and signs discussion will be added to a future agenda. And trustee Henley?
I'm just going back to the other one there, the board calendar. If one of those is too difficult to process that at the meaning if there's a proposal, here's the policies and the sequence, I think we should see that ahead of time so we can think about it and make sure that we would agree that those are the important ones we want to do first, second, and third.
Okay, actually, so our time is up. I would entertain a motion to extend the meeting to 5:45.
I move that we extend the meeting to 5:40.
Okay, it has been moved to extend the meeting to 5:40. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Only because I have to leave.
Sorry. Okay, the ayes have it, and so our meeting is extended until 5:40. All right,
I don't know why. We just have set special and regular meeting dates.
well, I actually, okay, so trustee Henley, could you repeat what you said? I'm sorry, I was focused on the time is up and missed most of what you said.
Okay, the item called discussion of CLN fiscal year 24 board calendar. I'm just hoping that if that is, I don't know that, but if that's just basically, here are the policies we need to review. And if they're going to be sequenced and presented at the board, I'd rather see that beforehand. Let's say it's an email out to the board. I can't, yes, that's all.
Okay. I am in agreement with that. Anyone else? Do we have consensus on that? Okay,
I
so,
would suggest that you have me prioritize based on
Oh, yeah.
that one, and then the board can discuss it.
yes, I'm already provided drafts. Okay. All right, and then I would like to add the COVID-19 policy and the director's 43920 emergency authorization to the next regular meeting. We have COVID-19 policy and the director's 42920 emergency authorization.
That's a policy.
Yeah, we're not going to discuss it or debate it right now, just whether we're going to put it on.
A new policy or existing?
No, this is already policy. I know it wasn't in our policy packet. I don't know what happened to it, but I've got a copy of it. COVID-19 policy, and I would like to discuss that. So trustee Blank?
Concerning that, given the list that are the magnitude of the material selection policy, the reconsideration and withdrawal policy, given the list that our attorney has just suggested that we look at, could we not put this on the agenda? This, they're very dated policies. Could we not put this on the agenda? I mean, it has the opportunity to hijack things. Can we be realistic about how much time we have to look at things?
Well, if it's outdated, we could just dispense with it real quick, because anyway, we're not gonna debate it. We're just gonna discuss, are we going to put this on future?
I don't have a problem, but much later. Let's look at our other policies.
I'm just gonna kind of state an overall best practice. For library boards, I usually recommend that they tackle one policy per regular meeting.
Yeah.
And so I suspect we're gonna have the material policy and the withdrawal policy, and now we have the director policy. And so there's already a lot of policies on it. I would recommend a prioritization on it, but maybe just not the next regular meeting, maybe a future meeting, so that we're all aware that it's something that to be added to the list, and I can add it back to that list of recommendations and that calendar. But I just thought about the next meeting when we already have probably 3 policies on again. We're running out of time every meeting. We're going over and heading, we're spending a lot of time cutting a minute for trustee training. And I mean, there's been a lot of 10 minutes for the director's report. I could have gone more. There's more that the board needs to know. I feel
Facilities management.
So I'm just, one policy per meeting is an effective strategy to get through it.
People delaying things on purpose, asking the same question over and over again would probably save us a lot of time. When we originally did the COVID-19 policy, I asked for a sunset date because it seemed like it would be dated at one point. And I was told no, that if I ever wanted to revise it, I would just bring it up. So that's what I have done. Trustee Hanley?
I'm not familiar with the COVID policy, but if it's seasonal dated, meaning we're going into flu season as applicable, if we don't address it, let's say at the next meeting, and maybe one has to pop up for a special meeting. Again, I know nothing about that particular policy, but we're probably not going to talk about COVID in July. So if it has to do with protocols or something, it could be month sensitive, if not date sensitive. So
Yeah,
again, speaking of no knowledge of what that policy contains.
we could just have a special meeting in between now and the next one. But did we have any other items to that? Actually, okay, so first we need consensus. Are we going to discuss COVID-19 policy and the emergency authorization?
Yes.
Yes, okay, I'm a yes. Hanley?
Not at the next meeting. We have too much and we've already put off facility maintenance.
I'm going to say,
I mean, we've got so much.
If it fits.
It was about the pandemic. It really, it is, you know, I'm
Okay.
not opposed to looking at it. Just,
I'll say no for the next meeting, just because of the time constraint.
yeah.
Okay, we could have a special meeting.
And if it rears its head, go up to the special meeting or emergency meeting.
Okay, well, then that failed consensus. All right, so
I
then.
think I understood that I could put it on the calendar though. Is that what I understood? I don't think there was any disagreement that we should review it, but we just need to put it in the order.
Yes.
Okay, Trustee Claus?
So I still had my request from a month ago that I think fell off, but to start to work on our bylaws, and part of it was getting a procedure in there, like what we started to do today, to call out how are we going to review policies so that we're not, I mean, I think we should specify that we're going to follow this. We're going to use a computer with a big screen where we can edit it instead of sending out copies for people to review. And next month, we need to go at it a lot faster. And I think the bylaws are what govern us, not we don't want to write a policy about ourselves. So I'm not saying how urgent it is, but I think that's where it belongs. We should consider some point changing in the next month or two, starting to change the bylaws to say how we review a policy.
Okay, that might be helpful, and it could even be quick, because I noticed in the minutes from the last one, there wasn't any discussion at all. They just approved it, apparently. So, Trustee Hammond?
I was gonna say, I think bylaw review, there is a statute on that. I think it does say the board, which we didn't do, is supposed to review or amend or add bylaw. It doesn't mean you can only do it then at the first meeting of the year, which I believe was June. So there is a requirement to do that. I'm not saying we can't do it before that, and we can do it then as well. I did read that.
Yeah, actually, I think the last time they were amended was in November of 2015. So that was.
I would maybe recommend as a topic and some time is kind of the board discussing what their priorities are. So I know right now the material selection is definitely a high priority, but helping all of us understand where we're going. And I think that's kind of what the calendar does, but maybe having a facilitated discussion on what your goals are, what you want to accomplish this year, what the priority is. Because what's very difficult for me is I hear one priority, I hear another priority, and I'm not hearing that sort of group team priority. And that's what I have to respond to. That's the direction that I get. And we also have a strategic plan. And I don't think the board necessarily wants that plan. And so fair, fine, great, but let's put together a strategic plan that you want so that we can move towards that as well. And sort of that unity for direction, if that makes sense.
So who makes the plan, you or?
Or we just,
I would recommend a facilitator kind of talking about different areas or different topics in a discussion and then kind of ranking first, second, third, or some type of mechanism like that. I can look into that. But I would recommend, honestly, it would not be expensive to hire someone for an hour to facilitate that for us. And then there's no bias and it's just a facilitated conversation. And I think it would be tremendously helpful for me and for staff to know what the priorities of the board are.
I just would like to say real
Hold
quick.
on. I was gonna say, we have, like 1 minute left of the meeting and still have set special and regular meeting dates. I would like to propose, that we meet on like November 30th. It's right in between, no, it's a Thursday, from 1 to 5 p.m. To discuss the materials selection policy, the materials withdrawal and reconsideration policy, and the director evaluation policy.
You're suggesting that we meet for 4 hours?
Well, it always ends up kind of being that direction anyway. So if we get done faster, then we could adjourn early.
It was the 30th.
Yeah, the 30th.
I can do that.
What time?
Should check to make sure this works. 1 to 5 or 2 to 6. I think 1 to 5 might be kinder to staff.
1:30 to 5.
Families.
We got 1 p.m. I don't know what they rest. What's,
It would also, I guess, depend on whether the room is available.
Weird.
But, so, yeah, I could go forward or backwards. Does that work? We have consensus on it?
1:30 to 5:30.
We have an event sort of like 5:30 to 7:40.
Okay. All right, so maybe
How about 1 to 4?
4.
How about 1 to 4? How about 3 hours instead of 4? I mean, 4 is just brutal.
Okay, I'm good for that if we can get down to business and just get it done.
1 to
I
4:30.
would recommend that we have legal counsel give some more information as well. He alluded to something that we added to our policy, and I don't know what that is. So I think there's perhaps some work that could be done outside of the meeting with getting that information and sending it in advance. But I would also recommend that we put legal counsel and some feedback from him on the agenda.
Okay, okay, so and legal counsel discussion.
Material selection policy?
Material selection.
Yeah, just so we could work, materials selection, materials withdrawal and reconsideration, director evaluation policy, and legal counsel.
I think you need to go more than 3 hours.
Not, that is brutal for people. We don't consider well. Why? We do not consider well.
Let's
What's the difference?
start at noon.
1 to 4:30 or something.
Doesn't work.
I just think for us to get clear, 3 hours is it.
I think 3 hours is a long time.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so 1 o'clock.
1 to 4.
1 to 4.
Okay, so 1 for as available.
We also we also need to check with Vanessa. We really need a full board for this. We really do.
Well, that would be best. It was hard to accommodate everyone's schedules. So I think that for now, we just go ahead and have consensus on this. 1 to 4. 1 to 4. All right, so we have consensus on that? Okay, so, all right.
You usually do the motion to adjourn.
Oh, you want me to adjourn? Okay, all right. I move we adjourn.
Okay, has been moved that we adjourn.
I was just texting Vanessa.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that is unanimous and we are now adjourned.
That was good.
Thank you, Tom.